I think we have enough to get started. So Brian, you want to start with your spiel?
I've got it now. I'm in the meeting. Thank you.
This is Brian. Sure, we'll go ahead and get started if you are ready to go. Welcome everybody to the Woodlands Mud #1 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, January the 19th, 2021. Appreciate everyone's patience as we continue to meet remotely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the remote meeting procedures and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we will continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our board of directors, Bob Wallach.
Present.
Walt Leshewski.
Walt Leshewski, present.
Ken Dorland.
Ken Dorland, present.
Jeff Long.
Jeff Long, present.
Hartley McIntosh.
Present.
That completes the roll call for our directors. We'll move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois. Maureen, are you in the meeting?
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
I'm here.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
I'm here.
Anyone else with Woodlands Water in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Anyone else with the River Authority in the meeting this morning?
I do not see anybody else, Brian.
Okay. Then if not, we'll go ahead and move on to consultants. Do we have any Woodlands Mud 1 consultants in the meeting?
John Knox with Knox Cox.
Any other Mud 1 consultants? Now, I believe we do have a representative from Howard Hughes in the meeting this morning. Dan?
Here, present.
Okay. We'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well. All right, that will conclude the roll call. I'll hand it over to Bob to begin the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any comments from the public at this time? If not, we'll move on to item number 3, update on Falling Star Court.
This is Mike. We've received the signed agreement from Mr. and Mrs. Pittsford. We're waiting on Mr. and Mrs. Billings. They've sent their agreement to their lender for signature. And we're also waiting on the township to sign their portion. They were given to the respective people the week of January 5th.
Can we expect to have that signed agreement this month, or how much longer?
The Billings didn't know, this is Mike again, the Billings didn't know how long it would take their bank to process it and review it. But I'm hopeful we'll get it by the end of the month.
So once we get it, we can start immediately on that project?
This is Mike. Yes, we're ready to go as soon as we get the signed documents.
Okay. Moving on to item number 4. Do we have any requests for adjustments, Mike or Jeannie?
This is Jeannie. I don't have any.
And this is Mike. Nothing from me this month either.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I have just one quick question for Maureen. On page 5 in the packet, we have a bottom line operating fund net of $969,470. How do you get that number? Is it
That is the year-to-date.
It's the 2,135 minus the 1,165?
Yes.
Okay. That's,
Yeah. It's a bit of a net loss at this point.
yeah. Oh, okay. And that's because we're expensing the AMI.
That was budgeted, so we're a little under on that, but we are under in water and sewer usage, maybe revenue.
Yeah. Okay. And I'd like to move item 10 out of the consent agenda. Yes.
This is Director McIntosh. I would like to go back to item number 5, a director meeting, item 17 of our last minutes. They should be changed to reflect that the Director McIntosh highlighted the WWA trustee summary that was included in the packet. And please add that it was stated that the board approved a motion to table action concerning approval of the $500,000 expenditure to study the feasibility of consolidating the 3 existing wastewater treatment plants. Now, Shelley, did you receive my email on that?
Yes, I did.
So Shelley has the change.
Okay. That's not on the current agenda. So,
well, no, that's an item number 5 on our consent agenda, is to review and act on the minutes of the December 2020 Board of Directors meeting. And we are changing item 17 of the minutes of December 2020, which reflect Bob Lilac as giving the report.
Yeah, which I did not do. There's no doubt about that. Okay. If there's nothing
without
else,
objection, I would suggest we adopt that change.
do we need a motion on that?
No, I made a motion.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second?
Without objection, it needs a second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
And once
If there are no objections, it is passed.
Yeah, once we've done that, Bob, I'll move for approval of the consent agenda with the removal of item 10 and with the changes that we've made.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? If not, Brian, please call the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion on the item, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Moving on, since we moved item 10 outside of the consent agenda, I'd like to hear from the SJRA, have their report.
Sure thing. This is Chris Meeks, and I'll start on page 16 of the report, and I'll just run down and give you some highlights. But if there's anything in particular you'd like to discuss, please let me know. Starting on page 16, you'll see the blend for groundwater and surface water. We are tracking that, of course, monthly, and what you'll see on that graph is the fiscal year to date so far. On page 19, it's the same type of information. We're showing the surface water blending data from basically 2006 FY16 up until current in the tables, and then below that you'll see the graph. which shows FY17 to current monthly data. Moving on to page 18, there is one item I want to point out here when you're looking at section 3, the key performance indicators. When you look at if you compare this month's KPIs for O&M cost of water and O&M cost for wastewater to last month or the previous month before that, you'll see there's a sharp difference in those two. What we identified last month, the director asked us to look into the KPI cost and why they're so much higher. So what we did after investigating and going back and looking more into the KPIs, for those two particular KPIs, we were including debt service as well as transfer to the R&R, which is not considered O&M expenses in the sense of this KPI. So starting with this month, we've removed those two items to get it kind of back in baseline with what the AWWA is using. So you'll see those numbers drop compared to last month. Regarding section 2, we did not have any violations on the wastewater side. And then on page 19 is an overall of the summary of the finances for last month, as including year to date, and then budget and remaining expenses. And then on page 20 is a recap of our projects to date. And then last on page 21, you'll see a special exhibit, if you will, of something that we've presented at the trustees and a couple water leaks that we've had in the past, in December actually. So what you'll see on page 21 on the left-hand side is a 16-inch PVC water main break that occurred roughly 2978 in Woodlands Parkway. On the right-hand side, you'll see a 16-inch PVC sewer force main that broke as well. That one actually broke on Christmas Day. The PVC water line broke 2 or 3 days before Christmas. The sewer force main broke roughly in the area of Lake Woodlands and I forget the road right now. Sterling Ridge, I believe. So with these two force mains, we've kind of added some verbiage here, and what it boils down to is this isn't a material issue. This isn't an operational issue. This is a construction inspection issue. And so with the 16-inch PVC water main, what you'll see, that little crack, and from when we dug it up and what was actually identified in the ground is it was a lack of bedding. So in other words, there was not enough sand or material underneath it besides just straight dirt to stop it from flexing as the ground moves slightly, as it does. On the right-hand side with the sewer force main, when digging that up, what we found is that's an issue of overbelling. And that's when one pipe is inserted too far into the other pipe and it causes stress on the actual flare or the bell. And then you'll see that long crack that kind of goes up towards the top of the page on the pipe, which is also due to improper construction, improper inspection of the sewer and water mains when they were put in. So, and that's one reason we wanted to show these, is because these are items that we always want to make sure we have inspectors on site to inspect the construction, watch them as much as we can. It's very important to have full-time inspection on these projects to make sure items like these don't come up and bite you in a few years from improper construction. With that, do you have any questions?
No, but this is Director McIntosh, and I have a comment. In 95, 96, we had another incident where we had a big hole in the road and a sewer pipe 26 inches, 26 feet in the ground had separated for lack of proper bedding. As a result of that and the $500,000 loss incurred in fixing it, Mud 40 went forward and got approval to hire a engineer for our mud, because we could no longer trust the engineer that had been hired to see that the specifications were properly followed. And we hired Shelsky at that time. He was replaced by Stinson later on when Shelsky was promoted to general manager. And I'm wondering why we're coming back with the same problems when we've hired an engineer on staff to go out and check all of these things that are happening. And you're saying that San Jacinto River Authority also is hiring an engineer to look at it. And when we've already known that we have bedding problems in the woodlands because we have difference between wet and dry years, I wondered what we're doing to ensure that we're getting proper bedding on all of the projects that we are now putting in as replacements.
This is Chris Meeks. I can speak from the River Authority side to some of that. Unfortunately, I cannot go back to when the 2 lines on that we just discussed were installed back in the early 2000s. I can tell you that on all of the River Authority projects, whether it be a vertical or linear construction, we do have construction manager inspectors, and we, even if it's contracted out, we oversee and still review and inspect the construction. Now with these 2 lines were installed by the development company back in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, I can't go back and speak for what the River Authority, Woodlands Water, or the inspector, or excuse me, the developer did back at that time frame.
Well, this is Director McIntosh again. The reason we hired a certified engineer on staff is for the reason to inspect all of these things. And when I saw that it happened after 1997, I was somewhat concerned that we're not going out on our own with the person we've hired to inspect those things and see that we're not going to incur these problems again. But that's just a comment.
This is Bob Lilac. Well, how would we inspect them? How can you determine whether you're subject to a problem without actually digging up and looking at these things?
Well, Director McIntosh, again, that's what we didn't want to do. We wanted them as they were installed. And remember, all of these things have to be approved, and they're not unknown to us that these things are occurring. And when they're installing these things, we're supposed to go out on site. Now, we hire an engineer to do these things, but we found out that they were just rubber stamping, and the contractors did not account for wet, dry years. So if the soil was dry, they never bedded those pipes. And then when we get a wet year, we have wet mud, and the pipes just sink away and separate. And that's what happened on the Wedgewood Drive fiasco that we had next to Lake Wedgewood in 95, 96. And that's why we hired an engineer on staff at the WWA to go out and inspect as the items were being placed in the ground.
Call from wireless caller.
And I'll just make a comment. We do have a inspector that's a Woodlands Water Agency employee that works under the direct supervision now, Mike Mooney. But I don't know that does our inspector inspect the San Jacinto River Authority construction facilities?
This is Chris. Not to my knowledge. I know on our site we'll have, for our projects that we're doing, we'll have our consultants, our construction managers, our inspectors, potentially consultant inspectors, so on and so forth. When it comes to lines that are going to be deeded over or given whatever it may be to the River Authority, if we know of them being constructed ahead of schedule, then such as anything the developer does, we do have folks that go and inspect and review the project as it's being installed, because as Director McIntosh said, once it's in the ground, the only way we can actually identify it is to dig it up and see if there are any issues. Even at that point in time, it's usually not going to be an issue, identifiable if it's overbelling or something. So.
And of course, this is Director McIntosh again. Of course, the Wedger Drive fiasco was San Jacinto River Authority pipe 26 feet in the ground. And then we had this great big cave-in and washout underneath the highway as occurred as a result of it. Then the engineers came out and gave us a proposal, and it was incorrect, and we had to abort that and do another one. And the whole thing ended up costing us $500,000. Now, that was shared by all the other MUDs, and that's why all the other MUDs got together and said, we don't want this to happen again, and we're going to hire a professional engineer, which we did, to go out and inspect these things. And we didn't say he's going to supervise somebody else. We said that engineer will go out and inspect and ensure that these things are done correctly.
This is Chris Meeks. Are there any other questions or comments on the Woodlands report I can answer?
Anything new on the lawsuits, legal battles?
Mr. Kelling may have an update. I know he provided something briefly before. I don't know if he'd like to speak on that matter.
What we provided at the trustee meeting is that in December, the Travis County District Court granted our motion on the EDJA case, and they determined that our contracts were uncontestable. Of course, Conroe has filed an appeal to that, and actually, they, in an unusual move, they filed an appeal to bypass the appellate court and go straight to the Supreme Court. And so that is being discussed. So that's about the only, everything else is sitting in courts waiting for courts to make decisions.
I'll probably never live long enough to see the outcome of that.
I don't think I will either.
Okay, anything further to discuss on item 10? If not, we'll move on to the regular agenda. Item 13, review and consider approval of the FY 2019-2020 draft audit report. We have any comments on that?
This is John Knox. If I can, I'd just like to make a few comments and then open it up to questions. Just quickly, on page 1 is our auditor's report, again unqualified, and that's what we want. If you can turn to page 12, that's the statement of activities, both at the fund level and the government-wide level. And I just wanted to highlight this because MUD 1 being a mature MUD, our fund balance increased by $53,000 and our government-wide net position increased by $77,000. That's very stable. And so I just wanted to point that out. Everything looked like it should, so that's good news. A quick reference to page 30. We added a footnote regarding COVID-19, which I believe your attorney is comfortable with, and it's just kind of a cover ourselves, make mention of that we do know COVID-19 could impact us. How, we don't know. At least we know that it is a threat. And then the last page that I'll turn your attention to is page 44. The board members, key personnel, and consultants. I always like the board to look at that, look for name misspellings, incorrect terms, incorrect titles, anything that you make me aware of that we can fix for the final. With that, I'll open it up to questions and request a approval. It's due in the middle of February, and so what we normally do is request for approval, subject to any minor modifications, for lack of a better term, from your consultants or the board, so that we can issue it in early February.
Do we have a motion to approve
Director McIntosh, I move to adopt the resolution authorizing an additional penalty, to approve the audit report.
Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion? If not, Brian, let's call for the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 14. Brian, I believe that's yours.
This is Brian. Yes, sir. So this is also connected to the audit. It is the requirement that was put in, that was effective, I guess, a couple of legislative sessions ago, that require for political subdivisions to provide certain financial information and other factual information to the comptroller for them to upload to their special purpose district public information database. MUDs are able to comply with this requirement by providing a copy of the audit to the comptroller. The district has previously engaged Knox Cox to handle that submission on behalf of the district. We do need to authorize them to handle that submission for the district's completed 2020 audit.
This is Jeff. Move for approval.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? If not, Brian, call the vote.
This is Brian. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 15. Brian, I believe that's also yours.
This is Brian. Yes, sir. So this is another one of our January administrative items to consider exemptions from taxation. You've got a draft of the resolution starting on page 27 of your packet. It does include the same exemptions that you adopted for 2020, which is a $10,000 over 65 and disabled exemption, and then a 20% residential homestead exemption. So if the board would like to continue the same exemptions, we do need a motion to adopt that resolution for 2021. If there's any desire to modify those exemptions, now would be the time to discuss those changes.
This is Bob Meilich. I move that we approve the resolution as described in item 15. Do we have a second?
This is Jeff. Yes. Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, you know something, it's interesting that we're all over 65, right?
It's easy
So,
to say,
we're all voting for exemption.
So I suspect that we're all going to approve this unanimously. Brian, call the vote.
Yes, sir. There's no further discussion. We'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Moving on to item 16. Ron, what's the latest?
Well, tomorrow we have a GMA 14 meeting at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, there's 9 items. You recall what most of them or all of them are?
Well, I think the two of interest are other factors that weren't described before, discussed before, even though there's an indication that Lone Star is going to want to revisit the socioeconomic factors. If you haven't watched the Lone Star board meeting from last week, Simon provided some public comments and a letter to Lone Star board. And basically one of the items he said was that not only, and I'm paraphrasing, he didn't use these exact words, but that Montgomery County should have their fair share of subsidence too. It should not be that Harris County got to create groundwater management rules that allowed 4 feet of subsidence. Montgomery County only had 1. They should be able to have not limited in their subsidence, which was a very interesting comment. So we'll see what more they say tomorrow. And then they start the process starting tomorrow of after tomorrow of how they're going to determine which DFC they're going to vote on. And that vote has to happen before May. So in either February, March, or April will be the key vote. So if anybody has any comments they want to make on the process or the DFCs, now's the time to chime in with GMA 14.
Is there still time to register as a speaker tomorrow?
Yes.
Is anybody from Estee, are you speaking, Ron?
No, Matt is going to present the information on the aquifer levels in the woodlands that we presented to all the MUDs last month. He's going to be presenting that information. I know that Dr. Meinrath is going to be providing some information on fault activation.
I've spoken, I think, 2 or 3 times, but I'm kind of worn out and I don't feel that they listen to me anyhow. Anybody else want to get involved? So I'd certainly encourage it. No. If nothing further, we'll move on to item 17. Brian?
This is Brian. Under the attorney's report, the only thing I have to report of a general nature is that the legislative session did open last Tuesday. As expected, Dade Phelan was selected as the new speaker on the House side. They're still working through items or issues related to committee hearings and attendance and how they're going to handle testimony, whether it be in person or virtual. The concerns related to those issues were, of course, compounded to be not only related to COVID now, but also related to security related issues. So we'll see how that shakes out, but they're just getting started. So no specific bills to bring to the board's attention at this point. That's all I have under the attorney's report.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 18. Neil and I put together a memorandum that's starts on page 29 in the packet. Has everyone had a chance to review it, and any questions or discussion on it?
Bob, are you assuming the savings would be similar to the first consolidation that MUD 1 went through? Somewhere, what was that, 50, 60,000?
I think it was around 64,000 or something like that.
Okay.
I would think that that the savings would be similar and possibly a little bit higher. And maybe there's some other things that we missed first time around. But I would say that's kind of a bottom line start, which is a mixture of cash savings as well as I'd call them soft savings, where we can reallocate staff time to other uses. And some people criticize that those are not real cost savings, but my argument to that, well, if those savings are not real, well, then their time is not worth anything.
Right. One other question, Bob. Are there any other districts that are similar to us? We have 0.075, I think District 6 has 0.08. Are there any others that are in that range?
Well, MUD 36, their bonds are fully paid, but their tax rate is so much lower than ours, and the reserves are vastly different. So that would present a problem. I think what Neil and I felt was that there's quite a similarity in terms of reserves per connection, and even tax rate and other soft things that, plus the physical adjacency of the two MUDs, that makes a lot of sense. The only major thing that neither of us have really identified is the AMI funding. MUD 1 has pretty much spent their money on AMI, where MUD 6 is budgeted the expenses, but have not spent anything. So I'm not sure what impact, if any, or whether it has any meaning or not, I don't know.
Yeah. How about MUD 7? It should be close. What is that rate?
I haven't looked at MUD 7, so I can't.
Director McIntosh, MUD 7 has outstanding bonds.
Oh, it does. All right, thank you.
Are they
This is Brian. No, MUD 7 has paid off their debt a year or so ago, so they are now debt free.
What's their rate? Is it 0.09 or 0.10 or something like that?
This is Brian. I can't remember what their rate is. Maureen, do you have their current tax rate from the budget? I know they haven't gone all the way down because they've been replenishing their reserves right after they completed the debt payoff. So they moved over some of the debt service rate to maintenance and operations, but they are debt free. Maureen, do you have that number?
Yes, I have them at 12 and a half.
That's okay. Yeah, if we get the answer later, it's fine. I just was curious because of the age of their infrastructure.
Well, Maureen said their tax rate is 12.5 compared to our 7.5. So,
right.
But I would expect that their rate, now that their bonds are paid off, will probably come down significantly. So that might be a future candidate for consolidation.
Let me ask a point of information. I've been reading several pieces of information that come from the township and other places, and I get a completely different idea from each as to who actually owns the facilities. And my contention is that the district owns all the facilities we borrowed money to pay for, and that if anybody wants those facilities to be part of their organization, like the township, they should buy them from us. Is that not correct?
Not correct.
What is correct?
Brian?
Yeah, this is Brian. So it's a little bit convoluted, but the 40,000 foot answer is small water sewer lines and drainage and detention facilities are owned by the MUD. The larger diameter water sewer lines, over 12, I think, for backwards, and was it 15, Chris, for sewer?
This is Chris.
I have those backwards.
You're right.
Okay. Are owned by the River Authority, along with all mechanical facilities, lift stations, water sewer plants, etc. So if there was a absorption for lack of a better term, of a particular mud, let's not say all of them, but just say a particular mud by, say, the township upon incorporation, the township would assume that district's debt or liabilities and assets. So if that district had outstanding debt, township assumes that debt, township assumes the assets. Township does not assume the facilities that are owned by the River Authority and operated by the River Authority. Those facilities will continue to be owned and operated by the River Authority, even if they were partially funded by mud that was absorbed. So a little bit convoluted, but that's the 40,000 foot answer.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob, you know, speaking of savings on page 32, estimated savings, you know, if I recall, and Hartley might remember this, but the election that we did for Mud 40 and Mud 2, I think cost us like $40,000 from the county.
It cost, I think, a lot more than anybody anticipated. That's true.
Yeah, I think it was around 40,000, if I recall, if not more than that. And the only other question is, on this cost saving, is there any savings from SJRA that's generated in this? Or
if there are, I have not, that was not identified in that study, but that's a good question.
But it could be, yeah, I mean, it could be part of the savings process.
This is Chris Meeks. From our side, we don't see any savings, cost savings. Like when Mud 1 and when Mud 2 and 40 consolidated, there was no cost savings. We still have the same assets. They're still aging, so on and so forth. It's strictly a mud item.
Any further questions? Okay, one of the
Director McIntosh, I want to applaud the effort taken by our president to work towards consolidation. I've always been in favor of it. And I'm glad to know that 7 is debt-free, because we may want to include them at the same time.
I have not talked to them to see whether they're amenable to that. It's up to the board how everyone feels. I think that would be very interesting to do so, but whether that would make it more complicated or not, I don't know.
Well, their tax rate is 12.5 cents.
Say again.
Yeah, this is Brian. So I know we've talked about this in the past, but when we talked about the consolidation of 2 and 40 and other possible partners, but it does definitely increase the complexity and the probability of failure at an election. That if you have one of these, one of the districts that didn't sign on, then even if the other 2 did, your election would fail. So I think we were more conservative in the approach in 2 and 40, and it worked out well. And as you said, 7 does have a higher tax rate, so it may make more sense to take it a district at a time.
That's my feeling too, Brian, and I appreciate it. It's been several years since 2 and 40 merged, and if we can be successful with Mud and 6, that would provide a stronger case for a future consolidation with 7.
Director McIntosh, involved in all of this is the change in the philosophy of the township. They had a study that they paid millions of dollars for that said, leave the muds alone until all of them have their indebtedness paid off. Now they're saying, wow, we looked at all of the money that you people have accumulated, and we would very much like to, if we become a township, to immediately consume all the muds and their debts. And this is this is a moving train, and we've got to go along with what is happening at the present time, because you can't believe anything that happens on the township because they change their mind all the time.
I sure don't disagree with you on that, Hartley.
I agree as well.
Welcome to local politics.
Any more discussion on the paper?
Yeah, it's good. Good job. Good work.
One of the recommendations there is that Neil and I would like to appoint 2 directors from each MUD to finish the study. What we did here was just pretty preliminary, but to do a little further in-depth research and to prepare a report and recommendation. Do we have any volunteers, people who would like to volunteer to do this from our side?
Yeah, I'll volunteer to do it.
Anybody else?
Well, the second person should be you, Bob.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I don't mind working on the sidelines, but
you've got the most knowledge of it, though.
Well,
yeah, Bob, you and
I'm certainly willing to do so.
Well, it makes sense. You have all the research done and understand it clearly.
Okay. All right, Brian. Do we need to make a motion, or can we just appoint myself and Walt to go ahead and do this?
This is Brian. You're talking about related to the consolidation. I think that would be at the president's discretion in terms of appointment of a committee to work on it. So there's no action by the board that's necessary.
Okay. So let the minutes show that Walt and I will do the research, and we'll get a report back to the board at our next February meeting.
And Bob, one other follow-up question I meant to ask earlier. What do you think the timetable is on this? I read through the report, and some of the complications and the sticky stuff is kind of toward the end when you have directors and terms and all that. What do you think the timetable would be? And
well, I really think it's going to be too late to get it done by May, even if we vote to do this in February. It requires a fair amount of publicity, and I don't know how long it takes to add it to the ballot, but I would say either a vote next November or the following year, 2022, at a May election.
You're saying November of 21?
Yes.
Okay, or May of 22. Okay.
Right. I don't think it's worth the money, as Walt pointed out, to spend $40,000 on a special election.
Yeah, Director McIntosh, we really ought to look at a general election date, because that would be less money.
Yes.
Because the county handles it and everyone votes. So we get more votes also.
Yeah, and that gives adequate timeline for publicity and ironing out any wrinkles or questions that people may have. So neither Neil or I are in any great hurry to do this. We just want to do it right.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further discussions on item 19, we'll move on to 20. Jim?
Wait a minute, that was 18.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, let's go to 19. Matt, you got comments on 19?
This is Ron. I have. The Water Development Board is supposed to consider the grant for the feasibility study for Spring Creek at the January 28th meeting.
Yeah, the first round, they did not say yes or no. So this is the second round, Ron. That's
yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully that'll work out. Anything else on 19? Now we'll move on to 20. Jim?
Thank you, sir. First of all, I want to comment. We received information from the San Jacinto River Authority at the trustee meeting, what we referred to as kind of a recap of our 6th and final grant accounting that I think was really, really good information that I had intended to get in the MUD meeting packets, but it didn't make it. So we're going to put that on your agenda and put it in your packets next month to give you that kind of that summary and the path forward regarding the grant accounting. At the trustee meeting, we did have a lengthy discussion about the consolidating of wastewater treatment facilities. We talked, the committee working on that, had a meeting last week and looked into I guess one of the major topics reviewed was the impacts to residential retail sewer rates, and a lot of discussion on that. We also decided that they decided they needed more information, so there will be yet another meeting with the San Jacinto River Authority staff and hopefully come back to the trustees in February with kind of a comprehensive information on impacts to residential bills and maybe a scope of work and a path going forward to look at that study. We also talked about the Sunset Commission report on the San Jacinto River Authority. President Eric Hurd appointed an ad hoc committee to work with our staff and the River Authority staff on public outreach and public education going forward. If you recall in the executive summary and as we've reported, the Sunset Commission has directed the River Authority to do more outreach to its wholesale customers, which means your MUD residents or our MUD customers. So we're looking at what that may look like and how to better inform our public about the San Jacinto River Authority roles in their budget and rate process. I talked about the HARC monthly report in your MUD packet is a summary of their monthly report if you've got any questions on that. At the trustee meeting, we also talked about a couple of residents have expressed concern regarding the poles that we have put up at 2 locations to transmit the signal from the meters back to our facilities on the AMI process. So I'll be meeting with at least 1 or 2 residents to try to work through their concerns about the pole construction. And let me stress, no public notice, no permits were required to put these poles up on San Jacinto River Authority well site or their properties, but we've got a couple of residents that are complaining that it's impairing or negatively impacting their view. So more to come on that. I also wanted to point out in your packet a notice about a subsidence webinar coming up. I found that to be very timely. So please take a look at that and consider signing up for that webinar. Also in your packet were copies of what we call our content agreements. These are agreements that have been used over the years to work with the developer and the MUDs regarding selling bonds and financing public improvements. I think Hartley and maybe a couple of others have requested a review of that document. So Brian Yates and Mike Mooney and I will be looking at that and presenting kind of discussion at either the trustee meeting and the MUD meetings next month regarding the content agreement. So with that, that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Hey, Jim, this is Walt. You know, about those polls, you know, you're right, you don't have to notify the residents at all, but you know, when I think it was Crown Castle came in and put the Wi-Fi's in, you know, they put their antennas on top of some of the existing light structures with the same color as the light structure. So it's, you know, minimal impact. And if you go where the HEB is on Woodlands Parkway, just off of Kirkendall, you know, they put a pole there, but it's a pine tree. It looks just like a pine tree. And so, you know, when the residents look outside the window, they see a tree there, but it's actually a antenna. You know, so you really don't have to, but you know, there are some options out there that you can make them a little more pleasing than a 75-foot silver structure in somebody's backyard.
Understood completely, and you're exactly right. The pole on Woodlands Parkway near the HEB that resembles a fir tree or a pine tree is very, very close to this new pole that was put up. So I'm sure that the resident there knows that there is an option there, I guess, from an installation standpoint. So we're going to look at it, work with them, and see what can be done to minimize the impact.
Yeah, in fact, I even had a meeting with the residents before they put it up, just so they knew that a pine tree was going to go there, and they showed them a line of sight and everything from their neighborhood. So just public relations.
Yes, sir.
Bob, how many poles do we plan to put up in the Woodlands?
You know, it's a combination. There are just a very few sites where it's a brand new pole. Most of the sites we're utilizing an existing pole or an elevated storage tank. Mike, do you remember how many new poles are actually going up?
This is Mike. I think it's 11 new poles that we're putting up.
Okay.
And this is the first pole that's been put up, or how many are already, of the 11, how many are already up?
There's only a handful, 2 or 3 remaining to be put up.
Okay. So we only have complaints on just the one?
Actually, we did receive a call from a resident near the Slash Pine or water plant number 1 over in Mud 36. Mike visited with that person and informed them we're looking at what we could do to reduce the impact. So we've had 2 official calls or concerns or complaints, if you will.
Yeah, the person that backs up to water plant number 1 actually shares a fence with that water plant. The other individual that backs up to the Kirkendall location where the tree cellular antenna is placed it's got a 120-foot drainage channel between them and the San Jacinto River property. So it's not in their backyard at all, but it is in the backyard per se on the one that backs up to Slash Pine, the water plant number 1.
This is Bob again.
Mile down the road, they'll say it's in their backyard.
This is Bob again. I'd like to return to the consolidation of the wastewater treatment plants. What's the motivation or reason for even considering doing this? Ron, do you have any insight on that?
I'll let Chris respond to that. He's been nurturing this thing, so. Chris?
My apologies. What was the question?
What's the motivation or rationale for consolidating the 3 wastewater treatment plants?
Oh, that's not a quick answer. It's kind of twofold. First is Wastewater Plant 1 is about to reach 50 years of age, and the assets, being the concrete in the ground, is starting to show it. So over the next 20 years or so, you'll be looking to replace those concrete assets. So Wastewater Plant 1, essentially over the next 20 years, you're going to rebuild Wastewater Plant 1 at a large cost. So what we started thinking about was, if you're going to be looking to spend a lot of money to replace what you have in kind. Yes?
I'm not getting any of that. I missed about 2 cents. So my computer said my internet's unstable, so it must have been me that missed it. So go ahead.
Basically, what we're looking at, is it better to replace in kind where we're at currently at Wastewater Plant 1, or is it better to relocate essentially Wastewater Plant 1, consolidate with Wastewater Plant 2, improve the process, the technology, the level of service, and what would the cost difference be between the two?
Do you see cost savings?
High level. Well, and it's a matter of perspective. If you're looking out 20 to 30 years and I'm rebuilding Wastewater Plant 1, then Wastewater Plant 2, from the high level overview, yeah, I see cost savings with the consolidation. If you're looking at immediate in the next 5 years cost savings, based off the plan we're on, consolidation does not have cost savings, because consolidation is a long-term plan. Replace as you go, which is what we're currently doing. It's a long-term plan, but it's not the most efficient and effective. So we have a lot of good graphs and a lot of good information to share. It's a lot harder just to talk on a computer about it, but hopefully some of the information we plan to present next month will kind of explain some of these and show you the 3 or 4 different scenarios of what drove us to recommending this potentially.
Yeah, we have a lot of data to show everybody next month.
Yeah.
So the cost of this study is $500,000. Is that correct?
There's a range. I mean, everything comes with a range based off of how many boxes you check, right? So what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, when it needs to be done. The range right now is roughly $500,000 to $1 million. And that is based off of how many boxes do you want to check? How many other things do y'all want us to look at on this initial study? Because like was discussed earlier with the towers, public engagement in this matter, in the feasibility and the consolidation, is a huge impact. We do need to know what the community wants. Do they even want consolidation? Do they want low rates? And I mean, obviously everybody wants everything they can for as cheap as they can, but do they want the best technology? Do they want environmental stewardship? Do they want, want to keep it like it is? Do they want the plants to basically disappear? So you don't see them, you don't hear them, you don't smell them. These are all things, from the operator side. To me, it's like, yeah, those would be great, but the folks that are paying for it should have a voice in it.
Okay, another question I have, are we now spending money for odor treatment control at plant number 1?
This is Chris Meeks. At Wastewater Plant 1, we are currently looking at it's a large question again. We always do odor control at Wastewater Plant 1, but additional odor control, we'll be taking the 10-man design to our board in January. Their approval is contingent on the trustees approving the 10-man design at the February trustees meeting. So anything additional to the 10-man, we are doing some odor readings continuously at Wastewater Plant 1. We have no other additional mitigation efforts in play.
What's going to be the cost of the 10-man project if that's approved?
The final design currently is at $197,000. Construction is estimated between 1.3 and 1.5 million.
So if we consolidate the treatment plants, that would be kind of a short-term expenditure with which we wouldn't get much economic benefit, if any, from.
This is Chris Meeks. On the consolidation of the wastewater plants, it's not a short-term item. It's not something that can be kind of whipped out in a couple of years. You'd be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 10 years from consolidation, based on all the study that needs to be done, the design, talking to the public, the permitting, the financing, and all that, plus not to mention actual construction. So you're looking at roughly 5 to 10 years for all that to take place, probably closer to the 10-year time frame. So in that 10 years, that's where the 10-man comes in to alleviate some odor during that time frame.
So when were the different facilities built? You say that treatment plant number 1 is what, 40 years old? How old is number 2 and 3?
So wastewater plant 1 was built in roughly 1974, 1975. So it's give or take 45 years old. It's had a lot of updates since then, but I think the bones of it was roughly 1975. Plant 2 was built in 98, second phase in 2003. So it's roughly 20 years old. And wastewater plant 3 is give or take 20 years old as well. So what you'll be looking at, talking about consolidation, more the long-term approach to it, wastewater plant 1 currently being where it is, you're looking over the next 20 years for replacement of concrete assets. As soon as, and let's just say we keep going with the replace as you go. As soon as wastewater plant 1 is completely rebuilt, and let's just say 2045, wastewater plant 2 is then at that time frame 20 or 50 years old. So wastewater plant 2 then needs to begin with the replace as you go, followed by wastewater plant 3. So all 3 plants are getting to the age where we should start thinking about what we're going to do with the future of them.
Okay. Any further discussion on item 20? If not,
yeah, this is Director McIntosh. I'd like to go back to 20, General Manager's report, and ask what is the report on 26 East Wedgwood? Jim?
Yeah, Hartley, I don't have that. I'll have to, I know that I had asked for an update and you had asked for an update, but I don't have it today. I'll have to get back to you.
nothing further on item 20. We'll go on to 21. I'm sure you read it in the packet like I did. It's a big disappointment not to see Neil Gaynor and Stephanie Zertucci appointed to the San Jacinto River Basin Region Planning Group. But the bottom line, I think there's still hope that maybe in the future we can get them and get them on there. So I would certainly like to support the two of them and offer whatever we can to encourage the group to accept them. And I'm certainly willing to volunteer to prepare a letter of support on behalf of Mud One, and I'd work with Jim to do this. So I would like to make a motion that we support Neil Gaynor and Stephanie, and I will also volunteer to draft a letter and work with Jim on that. Do we have a second to that effect?
Second. Director McIntosh, second.
Do we have any further discussion? If not, Brian will call for the vote.
Yes, sir. If there's no further discussion on the item, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt? Walt, how do you vote?
His mic's off.
Okay.
Ken? Oh, sorry. Walt Leszewski, aye. I apologize. Excuse me.
Okay. Ken?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item 22. Approve the resolution to submit the 2021 Water Smart application. Mike, we've been doing this for how many years now?
This is Mike. This is probably our 16th year or so of doing this. It's an annual January exercise. The report is due, or the submittal is due by March 1st. If you remember, it doesn't cost anything to join, but it's kind of a prestigious group to be associated with. You get certain tables at the conferences and so forth. So this year they are requesting not only a signed resolution, but actually a copy of the minutes where this was discussed and approved. So it seems like they're making it more difficult to be a member for whatever reason. But if you want to continue your association with WaterSmart and AWB, the WaterSmart program, I would appreciate concurrence on the resolution, and I'll get the application completed.
Do we have a motion to that effect? Come on, Ken, we need a motion from you.
If I understood exactly what we're talking about, I'd be great. I would be happy to do it, but
you'll have to read it to understand it.
It is Director McIntosh. I move that we approve the resolution by unanimous consent.
That's good.
How does that
need a second?
I'll second.
How does that work, Brian?
You just asked, are there any objections? If there are none, the item's passed.
Okay. Any objections? If not, the item has passed. Okay, Hartley, you're last on the agenda.
It's a nice report, and I think we've discussed most everything in it with the general manager report and the San Jacinto report. Are there any questions?
Yes. Hartley, on one of these public comments, said Director Brown, I don't know which director that is. We got so many directors. But anyway, asking about a consultant review the township's plan for incorporation and see how it affects the mud. You know more.
Yeah, Brown, of course, is a township director.
Okay.
And that's where they're changing their mind. Okay, they had this study they paid a lot of money for, said leave the muds alone until they all paid off their debt. If you become a township, if you become a city, okay, right now they don't have a choice. Township doesn't have a choice, but if they become a city, they have a choice. They can either bring all of us into and then we just become part of the city. And so they're studying it right now. And of course, you notice that Shakula Gibbs is taking an active role in the water issues that are occurring now. And I think she sees that as an opportunity to bring the muds into the township.
Well, yeah, I guess my question is, what was the motivation of him asking for us, the muds, to hire someone to study it when they've already paid these millions? And
well, it's ridiculous, but it's in the minutes, and we ought to go back and say, if the township wants that study, you've already paid for one. What new do you not understand?
Well, yeah, that's kind of the point of my question, I guess. Is
and that, Jim, what's your response?
You know, we've heard Chairman Bunch make comments at some political meetings that earlier in the year about a study that's going to be forthcoming. I think the last I heard it would be the first quarter of 2021. an independent study of the township regarding mud's being dissolved and being part of the township should they become a city. So that's the study that we don't have any information on. We don't have it. And I think that's what Director Paul Brown was referring to. When and if that study comes out, his suggestion is that we have an independent review that. That's what I think it's about.
Yes, and of course the township smells our reserves, and that's really the motivation.
Well, the reserve.
They actually did have a study already done when the NOAC group studied the muds and presented that to the township board already. So, I mean, they're just wasting more money doing this. They already have $23 million aside.
Walter is right. There was a very thorough, detailed analysis done of the muds by an independent consultant. And if I remember it, I'll paraphrase, but the summary was, if you become a city, let the muds continue to operate until their debt's paid off and their tax rates are comparable.
That's exactly
Director McIntosh, Jim, you did a wonderful job in giving a consultant everything they needed for the study, and they took your information, put it in a new format, and got their money. But that's what consultants do.
What is the name of this report? In other words, if someone wanted to get a handle on it or get a copy of it, what would you ask for?
You can go online on the township website and you could pull up the incorporation study and you could pull that off of there. It should be on there.
Okay.
Of course, they fired those consultants afterwards.
And Ken, I think we have a copy of the HR Green the portion on just the mud analysis. I'm pretty sure, Mike, do you remember if you still have that in your file?
This is Mike. I do, Ken, and I'd be happy to email that to you or somehow put it on the Google Drive. It's quite lengthy.
I would appreciate, yeah, please do. I would appreciate getting it.
Okay, we'll do that.
Could you put it on the put it on Google Drive?
That's the report that was. That's Mike's report is the one that was done last year or before. What Chairman Bunch is talking about is a report to be released. It has not been released yet.
Okay.
Director McIntosh, obviously the problem that presents itself is do we want to pay off Creekside's large indebtedness? Because Creekside's got a huge indebtedness and they're not part of the WWA.
No.
Well, I think everybody has, I did an analysis of that consolidation of all the muds with and without mud 386. I sent it to Jeff Forward at the Villager to see if he'd publish it, and he refused to publish it. So, but everyone should have a copy of that. If not, I can have that resent out.
Here's a copy of it. I've got the one from the township. It was done, submitted to him September 13th of 2018.
Any further discussion on the trustees' report?
I think I better not ask my other questions.
Thanks, Hartley. Okay, item number 24. Anything for next month's agenda? Certainly, Shelley, I want to put the consolidation report or study on the agenda for next month. Anything else? Anybody have anything else? If not,
we will have the grand accounting review, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Okay, now we move on to everyone's favorite item. That's item number 25. Adjournment. If there's nothing further, we'll adjourn the meeting. Good seeing everybody. We'll see you all next month.
Peace. Be safe.
See you next month.